Good morning, 8x5. I hope you're doing well, that you are keeping healthy and safe. And whether you're at home or at school, that you are getting through this time of lockdown. I don't know how you feel, but I definitely am missing the classroom. And I look forward to the day when we're all back in it and that we're teaching and learning face to face together. But here we are. So we're going to continue with what we've been studying, which is the war poetry and the rhetoric. Remember, the war poetry is poetry about war, most of it coming out of World War One, when some of the best war poetry was written. But we're looking at the poetry as a way to actually get some views or some insights into rhetoric. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion. How do you convince people to do what you want them to do, or to believe what you want them to believe? So we're going to turn to that now. I know that this is a very challenging topic, and that's why I regret, it's one of the reasons why I regret not being in the classroom with you, so it's easier to do question and answering. But we're going to see how it goes. So good luck with today's lesson. I'm hoping that next week on Tuesday that we'll be able to run this as a live lesson. We'll see how that goes. Okay, your lesson falls at a bit of a tricky time for me if I'm at home with my children running a bit crazy, but we're going to do our best to have at least 5 to 10 minutes of private time without interruption where I can try and teach you live and take and answer any questions you've got. So let's look forward to that next week. For now, let's turn to our lesson. Our learning objective today is to look at the purpose of rhetoric, which I summarize for you as the art of persuasion, of convincing someone to believe or to do something. We're going to look at it in a bit more detail. Let's look at this opening slide. For example, you see this propaganda image. Propaganda is a kind of text, writing, artwork, video that tries to make someone believe something, or do something, or think something. This was a famous poster back from World War II. What is it trying to convince people of? It was successful. Why do you think it was successful? Take a moment to think about that. Pause here and just write down a single sentence, a bullet point. What is this poster trying to do? Why was it maybe successful? Do that now. And then unpause. So, rhetoric, and a lot of the theories about rhetoric have an origin in a man called Aristotle, a philosopher from a long time ago, who wrote about all sorts of things. As a teacher of English, often the focus is on Aristotle and what he had to say about poetry and drama and literature. But he's possibly most famous for what he had to say about rhetoric, the art of persuasion. Now, write down the definition. You see here, rhetoric is the art of persuasion, and the goal of persuasion is to change others' point of view and to move them to do something, to act. You can pause here to write that down in your book or into a Word document, as it's asking you to do on the side, and then let's carry on to the next part. So you're going to draw this triangle. This is sort of picking up on stuff that we saw in a previous lesson, but we're just going to consolidate, try and make sure that it sticks in our mind, that we remember what makes up rhetoric. And once you've got this triangle, you're going to see there's 3 parts to this idea of rhetoric, of persuasion. And these 3 parts are ethos, pathos, and logos. Right? So we're looking at ethos, meaning credibility. Pathos is something to do with the emotions, and logos has to do with logic. So let's have a look at logos first, logic. Okay, the way of doing things in a reasonable way, based on thinking it through, logic. So, logos is an argument based on facts, evidence, and reason. Using logos means appealing to the reader's sense of what is logical. For some people, not for everyone, logic, reason, can be the most convincing aspect of an argument. So if we turn here to Winston Churchill, speaking around the time of World War II, Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free, and life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. Now, I wouldn't say the only technique being used here is logos, but there is an appeal to reason and to logic. What do you think he is saying here that is based on reason and logic? Take a moment to pause and write down a bullet point in which you write down what element of this statement is logical. Next, we look at ethos. Ethos is an argument based on character. It's rooted in the individual. So the writer or speaker presents themselves to the audience as credible, trustworthy, honest, and ethical. I'm an expert, so believe what I say, would be an ethos-based argument. I suspect that today, ethos is one of the most common forms of rhetoric that we see in the popular media. If you take someone like Trump, who as of today is out of office, I would say a lot of his arguments were based on ethos, based on him. Trump presented himself as an expert, and therefore we should believe in what he said. He was not often using logos, reason or logic, as a reason to believe what he said, in my opinion. Which again, me trying to convince you based on my opinion, is probably ethos. I'm trying to get you to believe what I'm saying based on the fact that I'm a teacher, for example. So, look at this statement by Jane Campbell. Some of the debaters talked about how terrible it must be to have someone else take you to the toilet. That's my life, mate. And I hate the term vulnerable people. It sets the image up before they find out what you really like. Really, I'm bossy, I'm ambitious, and have ants in my pants. I'm excited about things and people. I love ideas. I love life. So you can see how the argument she's presenting, and with the extract, I admit it's hard to get the full idea of what she's trying to convince you of here, but it is rooted in her own existence. It's rooted in her as an individual. That's my life, mate, she says. And finally, we have pathos. Arguments based on feelings, based on emotions. Okay? You're appealing to the reader. Now here in a reader, it could be somebody who's listening or watching or reading a text. You're reaching out to those feelings they have. Arguably, this is another one of those major forms of rhetoric that we see commonly today. If you're getting a lot of your ideas, of your rhetoric from, say, social media, Facebook or Twitter or whatever, often it's about feelings and emotions, not about the logos so much, but also about the ethos quite a bit. So here, it's an argument based on feelings. Here's an example. Some chickens aren't completely knocked out by the electric current and can be seen struggling frantically. Others avoid the circular saw somehow. A backup worker is supposed to cut the throat of those missed by the saw, but any that get by him are scalded alive, the investigator said, from Nicholas Kristof in To Kill a Chicken. You can imagine that this is an extract from a text that's trying to convince you that the meat industry isn't particularly nice. And what language here is reaching for the emotion? Well, you've got electric current, struggling frantically. Then you've got the saw, the cutting of the throat, scalded alive. These are horrific details that are meant to make you feel uncomfortable and to convince you that maybe the meat industry is bad and therefore eating chicken is bad. Now you might take a step back and go, but I love chicken. But this is trying to show you a side of it that might change your mind. This is rhetoric. So now a quick check to see if you've understood logos, pathos, or ethos. Logic and reason, emotion, or character. We got 3 quotes here, A, B, and C. Which one is logos? Which one is pathos? Which one is ethos? Which one is reason and logic? Which one is character? Which one is emotion? Don't click forward on the PowerPoint. take a moment to write down which one is which, and then check your answer. So pause here, do the work, and then let's go forward. Did you get it right? Let's find out. So here are your three answers. A was pathos, B was ethos, and C was logos. Now, I'm mindful this video is getting a bit long, so I'm going to turn it back over to you for the next task. So we're going to be looking at some bits of war poetry and imagery to go with it. And I want you to identify whether it's ethos, character, pathos, emotion, logos, reason, and logic. So I'll just quickly click through the slides ahead so you can see what your work is. So you get here a bit of poetry, read it. I appreciate that the language might be thick, but often that kind of heavy language tells you that it's trying to do one of those three techniques, and see if you can find out, if you can decide which rhetorical technique it's using. Is it using pathos, ethos, or logos? Okay, now the answer is on the next slide, so don't just quickly click ahead. Read, write down an answer, and then go forward. Okay? You'll see that there's a number of poems for you to look at. So how did you do? As it says on the side here, you probably noticed, or you should have noticed, that ethos and pathos are the main kinds of rhetoric being used in the war poems in this PowerPoint. The question is why? Why is there not much logos? Why is there not much logic and reason in war poetry? And that's quite a challenging question. So I'm going to leave that with you. Can you try and write down in a sentence or two, or even a full lengthy paragraph if you've got a lot to say about this, why do we not find reason and logic as often or at all in war poetry? Please write down an answer now. And there we go, 8x5. There's your lesson for today. I hope at the end of this idea of rhetoric, of persuasion, of convincing someone of something to do something is a little bit clearer for you. There are three main elements to try and remember. Three words to take away from this lesson: logos, reason, logic. The second word is ethos, which is character, the person who's trying to convince you. And then finally, pathos, emotion. Please try and take those three words away with you. Upload to Teams the work that you've managed to do today. And most importantly, keep healthy and keep safe. And I'll see you next week. Goodbye.